بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله أحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة أما بعد. Dear Muslims, Ibadullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As always, sometimes it's difficult coming up with a topic for the khutbah, especially here at Masjid al-Nur, because we have someone like Imam Rabi, who's been doing it for so long, and usually when he drops that khutbah, he's giving you something that you should put your teeth in and hold on to it. He's a hard act to follow. Alhamdulillah. But today, I want to talk to us about the salah, because sometimes it seems that we Muslims, we take the salah for granted. We don't look at it as how the Prophet ﷺ and his companions did. One thing we have to be aware of, there's only one way to practice the deen, and that is following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we know that the Prophet was divinely ordained. As one of our teachers said in school, amongst the Quraysh, there were others, even though they ended up being the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, that could have been chosen. They were knowledgeable, they could read and write, they had status within the Meccan society, but yet and still, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for reasons known only to him, he chose to send Jibreel alayhi salam to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu with the last revelation to come from him, Al-Quran. But just as the Prophet sallallahu was divinely chosen, those who we've come to know as his Sahaba, his companions, both male and female, were divinely chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and brought into Islam. And so what we want to look at, to practice this deen, there's a reason why the Prophet said it is incumbent upon every Muslim to seek knowledge. Because this deen, this way of life, is not one that you can be ignorant of. And the reason is because in educating yourself about what the Prophet did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he watched others do that he did not object to, becomes tantamount to practicing his deen. And the ones that he did this with, that gave the example, were his companions. Nothing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was by mistake. Allah is perfect, subhanahu wa ta'ala. What he gave to us and those before us in this deen is perfect. We Muslims may come up short, but the deen, the way of life, Islam, is perfect. And so there's a whole generation that we have the example to follow. The great scholar Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, he was asked a question. The question that he was asked, who are the Ahl Hadith? Who are the people of the Hadith? Who are they? And his answer was, the people of the Hadith are those who had followed the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions, and they do what they did. We know about the Sahaba in more than one place in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like in Surah Al-Bayyinah, He says about them, indeed, in speaking about the Sahaba, the Ansar and Muhajirin, the males and the females, He says, indeed, He is pleased with them, and then they are pleased with Him. So what we want to take a look at here is the Salah and its importance. A reminder for myself, first of all, and for you as my brothers and sisters in Islam. Because the Salah from the Prophet ﷺ, there's not one act of ibadah that we can do that is more important than the Salah. Not one. There's not one more important than the Salah. And as I go along, keep that statement in mind. There's not one, and it's not from me. It's from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's not anything we can do in terms of ibadah, whether it's paying zakat, the hajj, fasting, nothing for the Muslim is more important than the Salah. So, you have some individuals, unfortunately, who they curse the Sahaba. They curse every one of the Sahabas of the Prophet's immediate household. You have those who say that they're Muslim, but they make dua to the Prophet, which should not be done. The Prophet said, there are people who fast only to become hungry and only later to eat. Only to become hungry and later to eat. And some of you look at me and saying like, okay, what's up with that? Okay, so, and here's the circumstance is that Ramadan comes and they don't fast as the instructions given by the Prophet or in following his companions. Meaning, they may not eat instead of their fasting, but they smoke cigarettes. They're fasting, but they'll still watch things on the TV that they shouldn't watch and that their eyes shouldn't see. And so in this statement, this is why the Prophet said, there are those who fast, but they only fast to be hungry and then to eat. That's it. So, when you think about this, we're going to go back again and witness something that happened with the Prophet. Again, it's about showing the importance of the Salah. A man came into the masjid and he prayed. And the Prophet watched him pray. And when he finished, the Prophet said to him, pray again. The man prayed a second time. And when he finished, he gave salam to the Prophet and the Prophet said to him, pray again. You have not prayed The man prayed a third time. And when he finished, the third time, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, pray again, because you have not prayed. The man said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, teach me how to pray. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught him every aspect about the salah. What to say, but not to say. And so here, about the importance of the salah and how we pray. It's not that the man did not pray. He was told that he did not pray because he didn't pray in the manner of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of how it should be done. And the man, after the third time, he understood. And that's when he said to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, teach me how to pray. And the Prophet taught him how to pray, the whole salah. Some of the things he said to him was, when you go into ruku, take the time, don't rush. When you're in sajda, take the time, don't rush. Recite of the Quran what you know. So all the things about how it should be done, this person was told and taught by the Prophet ﷺ. And so we have to take a look at this. One of the things we have to realize is that there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, a very famous hadith. It's very long, but there's part of it that is of extreme importance to us. The Prophet ﷺ said, there will be a time when there would be many scholars and few individuals to give the khutbah. And then he said a time would come that there would be many individuals that would give the khutbah and few scholars. And the question was about that. What did he mean? So if we take a look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, come with me. You walk into the mosque, and who do we see? Abu Bakr, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Uthman ibn Affan, Abdullah ibn Masud, Abu Bakr al-Ghafari, Aisha, all of these individuals were scholars. Every last one of them, male and female. And the only person who ever ascended the minbar to give the khutbah until he died was the Prophet ﷺ. Just him. When he ﷺ died, Abu Bakr ascended the minbar, and the people, even though they knew that the Prophet ﷺ had died, were shocked. Because no one had ever been on the minbar except the Prophet ﷺ. And Abu Bakr, in his respect and love for the Prophet ﷺ, he only went onto the second step. The Prophet always stood on the third step of the minbar, and Abu Bakr only went to the second. Nowadays, and I'm not saying this as a fault, but nowadays, you go to a city, every masjid may have 3 or 4 people that give up, but very few scholars. And I'm not looking at Masjid al-Nur because that's what we have. You know, Allah has us to know. None of us try to pass ourselves off as being scholars. Okay. But the number of khatibs are many. The individuals, the scholars are few. Why is this important in terms of the deen? Because we are responsible for how we practice this deen. And there's only one way to practice as the Prophet ﷺ did. We fall prey because we don't follow the injunction to seek knowledge. It's incumbent upon us to do so, and when we don't, we fall prey to so many different things. A person comes and says, we should be doing this, and this. They quote a spurious hadith, that something is not a hadith at all. It sounds good, and we follow it in the aspect that we shouldn't. The Prophet ﷺ said, in terms of the importance of the salah, he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, the entire earth has been given to the Muslim as two things: a place of purification and a place to make the salah. A place of purification and a place to make the salah. The salah, and the incumbency upon us to make it, never leaves. It never goes away. So a person says, I don't have any water to make wudu. The Prophet ﷺ said, the earth is a place of purification and a place for the salah. So there's tayammum. Even for that doctor who has a surgery coming up, and it's going to take him 5-6 hours, he's still responsible for the salah. Because he can join Dhuhr and Asr together. And if he has to, Maghrib and Isha. But he's still responsible for the salah. The person who is conscious, but on his bed, paralyzed, he still has to make the salah. If it's nothing more than batting his eyelids with each circumstance, the salah is still incumbent. And how incumbent is it? The Prophet ﷺ said, listen very closely. The Prophet ﷺ said, the only difference, between us, the Sikhs, the Hindus, the Christians, the Jews, whoever else, is the salah. The only difference, what separates us from them, is the salah. I don't care who it is. If they're not having said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, they're not from us. And it's the salah. Not because I'm saying it, because this is what Allah's Prophet said. This is what separates us from them. So, let's take it a step further. The Prophet ﷺ in another hadith said, the person who leaves the salah, he's kafir. The person who leaves the salah is kafir. So amongst the Sahaba, they made excuses. They may see a sister with not hijab on and they say, well, she may just came into Islam. Give her time, she'll get there. They know a person hasn't paid his zakat. They'll make an excuse for him. They know they may not have fasted Ramadan. They'll make an excuse. But if it came to the point of finding out that someone was not making the salah, had left the salah, it was seen as being kafir. And this is from the Prophet ﷺ. Very sound hadith. So let's take a look at this. A person comes to us, wants to marry our daughter, wants to marry our son. We will ask them about everything, except if they make the salah. Everything else. You have a good job. You got a car. Can you put my daughter in a nice home? And very seldom when we ask the person, do you pray? Do you observe the salah? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, there's nothing worse than not making the salah. He ﷺ also said, some of you, speaking to his companions, there will be individuals. A man may embezzle millions of dollars. But the greatest thief that the Prophet ﷺ talked about was the one who denigrates his or her salah. Take the money. And the Prophet ﷺ said, the thieves amongst you are those who neglect their salah. This is what he ﷺ said. And this is how his companions conducted the circumstance. The Prophet ﷺ said concerning the Dajjal, so the Dajjal will come. He will be on the earth for 40 days. 40 days. The first day will be the equivalent of a year. The second day, a month. Third day, a week. And then the days after that will be according to the time that he comes. The Sahaba, they heard this, and they became very afraid. And they asked the Prophet, what do we do if he comes? The Prophet said, if he comes while I am with you, I will protect you from him. If he comes after I'm gone, you're on your own. Now, two things here. Some individuals like to think that the Dajjal is nothing more than something that you can think about. No. Prophet talking about the Dajjal, he'll be a live, human individual. In another hadith, just to digress for a minute, we talk about the Yahud, the Jews. We watch what is happening, has happened in Palestine, in Gaza. In another hadith concerning the Dajjal, the Prophet said that the Dajjal will appear and come, and with him, he will bring 70,000 Jews from Isfahan. And much of the turmoil and the torment that will happen because of this. But when we look at the Salah and praying the Salah as the Prophet ﷺ has instructed us to, he said to the companions that were gathered with him, if I'm with you, I will protect you from him. If I'm not, you're on your own. So the question becomes, did he sallallahu alaihi wasallam leave his companions and leave us without a protection? So I ask myself first, and the question is posed. There's not a salat that we should make that the Prophet ﷺ gave us 4 things during the course of that salat to seek refuge from. And they should be said, Ya Allah, a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from the punishment of the grave. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab al-nar. O Allah, I seek refuge from you from the punishment of the fire. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-fitna al-dajjal. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from the fitna of the Dajjal. You see, with this dua, and the other one is from seeking refuge from the vagaries of life and death. You see, if we seek the refuge during the salah, praying as the Prophet taught his companions and as they did, and it's pretty done being fisabilillah, then indeed the Prophet didn't leave us on our own. He gave us a dua to say in the salah when we're sitting in tashahhud, to seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the Dajjal. One of the things that the Prophet ﷺ taught his companions, in any week, the best salah, some of you already know what I'm getting ready to say. The best salah, especially for brothers, if there's a masjid close, is to pray Salatul Subh and Salatul Fajr in Jumu'ah. The Prophet said, there's no better salah than that in that week, in each week. Then if we're close to a masjid and you can get there for Salatul Fajr and Jumu'ah, that's better than Salatul Jumu'ah from the Prophet ﷺ. One of the things that the Sahaba did that we don't, if they went into a city, before they took knowledge from someone, they observed it. They waited to see what they did, what their mannerisms were. How inclined with the Sunnah of the Prophet were they? And if they weren't, they didn't approach them to seek knowledge from them. In our world, today, a person can come, seems to be knowledgeable, seems he has some aspect about the Quran and the Sunnah, and will follow any and everything that they say. So taking knowledge from someone is a very serious matter. And the Sahaba would observe to see if this person was truly one that they could take knowledge from. Again, the Prophet ﷺ said, the biggest thief is the one, he or she, who steals from their salah. So we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we begin to pay more attention to the salah. All of the salah are important. If we come before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Yom Qiyamah, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he exhorted and said to his companions, there will be nothing that you will be asked about before being asked about the salah. If the farz salah is deficient, then the sunnah salah, the nawafil, become extremely important because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use them to bring the salah up to where it should be. That's a mercy and rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the idea is that we should put ourselves in the best possible way and circumstance, but then not to be a weakness in our farz salah. If we're entering the salah and our minds are on any or anything else other than making that salah, the fard as well as the sunnah and the nawafil for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we're stealing from our salah. So let us pay attention to our salah. وقولوا قولي هذا استغفر الله واتوب اليه. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين على آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. I want you to come with me. We're going to look at two circumstances. In terms of the deen, they're sad. In terms of the lesson that it gives us about the importance of the salah, extremely important. Actually, there's three. There's a very famous Imam, Imam al-Zuhri. His teacher was Anas ibn Malik, radiallahu anhu. Anas ibn Malik, his mother was a Sahaba. His mother, radiallahu anha, she took Anas ibn Malik when he was 10 years old to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said to him, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, indahu aql. She said about Abdullah ibn Masud that indeed he had a sharp mind. Anas ibn Malik stayed with Rasulullah for 10 years. He traveled after that 10 years. And went to different places. And he would see things being done by the Muslims, and he would cry. In his cry, he would say, I don't recognize what these people are doing in terms of the deen. He said, I see them making the salah, but with some, I don't recognize it. Not from what the Prophet ﷺ gave us. The next statement is not to pass judgment on anyone, but for us to take a look at something. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims in Medina and Mecca prayed Salatul Eid on the same day at the same time. Now, in our time, the other considerations have come into play. But there was a time, Eid, both of them were done at the same time. And one of the most hated persons in the history, Islamic history, is Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Yazid became Khalifa after his father Muawiyah died. And some say this is when the great fitna started, because Muawiyah started the practice of passing the Khalifa on to the son. And Yazid was given it. Muawiyah died. But we know from the Prophet ﷺ, he taught that the salah should be prayed at the time that it's been appointed to pray. And something to think about here. It shows again the importance of the salah and the Prophet ﷺ. While he was on the Isra, different things come to him. Because we know the Prophet ﷺ said, Buniya al-Islam ala khams. Indeed, Allah is built upon 5 things. Zakah, the aspect of the Hajj, fasting. Those 4 things, 4 of them, other than Salah, Angel Jibreel brought them to the Prophet ﷺ when he was on Isra. But when it came to the Salah, it was the Prophet ﷺ speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the aspect of the Salah didn't come to the Prophet ﷺ by way of Jibreel. It came through him having a discussion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here we know how many times the Prophet ﷺ went back. Because let's ask a question here. Is there much of a difficulty as some of us have of making 5 salah? What would we have been doing or doing now if that first number given to the Prophet ﷺ of 50 had been incumbent? And even at 5, Musa said, what to Rasulullah, go back again. That would be too much for your people to handle. And the Prophet ﷺ said no. Whether he ﷺ was ashamed or he accepted what was there, the color of the law was for it to be 5. When you're receiving that aspect of the salah, Jibreel didn't bring that to you. He got it directly from him, talking with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this individual Yazid, Certain things happened during his time. One of them, for the Shia, is a very important day because during this time, a rebellion takes place. Ali's and two sons, Hassan and Hussein. Hassan is approached by individuals to take up the mantle against Yazid. And at this time, the capital had switched. Medina had been in for a minute. When Ali becomes Khalifa, he moves into Iraq, and the city of Kufa is established. And that becomes his capital. Muawiyah had been made governor of Asham, of Syria. And when he becomes Khalifa, he keeps the capital there. Hussein, for whatever the reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended, decides to take up the mantle of rebellion against Yazid. Yazid sends a person by the name of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf with an army of 10,000 men to intercept Hussein, who was leaving from Iraq, coming towards Mecca. Hussein has a small force. He's greatly outnumbered by the force that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf brings. But he comes because he's been promised that those who talk to him, that on his way there, his numbers will swell. There will be support for him. The support never shows up. And what is called the Battle of Karbala takes place. And Hussein is killed. He's beheaded, his head placed on a pike, and sent back to Yazid for him to see. One of the things that Yazid did to show you how terrible he was, he delayed praying Salatul Jumu'ah until Maghrib. He delayed praying Salatul Jumu'ah until Maghrib. And he had individuals with swords with the orders to strike down anyone who said otherwise than praying Salatul Jumu'ah at Maghrib. Some individuals died because they wouldn't pray Salatul Jumu'ah at Maghrib. Come with me. Umar ibn al-Khattab, during the 12 years of his Khalifa, the Ummah expanded. Asham, al-Khus, were taken during his time. Umar has a problem. He gets into an argument. They don't get the person's name, but we know he was one of the Majus. This person said, I'm going to kill Umar ibn al-Khattab. So he got a knife. As a matter of fact, he got two knives. He sharpened them and laced them with poison. But this is the thing. He never approached Umar when he saw him. The reputation that Umar ibn al-Khattab had, if you were talking about doing something like that, as we would say, You better bring a lunch and maybe dinner too, because it wasn't going to be easy. So when did this person attack Umar? He attacked him while he was making salam, because he knew with Umar, and the other Sahaba, when they entered into the salah, they were in the salah. There were no thoughts of, what is my wife cooking for dinner? Did the caravan get to where it's supposed to go? So he attacked Umar. He not only stabbed Umar, he stabbed 14 other people who all died. But Umar, his reputation and who he was in terms of his aqidah, his tawheed, his devotion to the prophets of Islam, as bad as he was wounded, people thought that he was going to survive. But one thing happens here. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, even with 14 other people being stabbed and Umar being stabbed, he continued to survive. And then they went to look after Umar. It's not to say that the circumstance, and inshallah, it never will happen amongst us, that if we stopped the salah and took care of the individuals there, there's nothing wrong in that. But the Sahaba here, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, how special is he? He's one of those scholars that I was telling you about. He was one of the 10 that during his lifetime, the Prophet told him that he would be in paradise. He steps forward and he completes the salah. Umar, they take him to his home. They're still thinking he's going to survive. But as we witness, they give him warm milk to help him. And as he drinks the milk comes out through the wounds in his intestines where he's been stabbed. And then they knew Umar was going to die. Sahaba gathered and say, as we witness, don't let him lose consciousness. Don't let him lose consciousness. Abdullah ibn Abbas, another of the strong Sahaba, he had one job, and that was to let Umar know when the Salat ended. And so when Umar was hard to be woke up, he said, I know one thing that will get him to awaken, to regain consciousness. And he said to Umar, Yeah, Amir al-Mu'minun, waqtu salah. It's time for salah. Umar comes into consciousness. And Umar says, before his death, to the people gathered there, he says, Wallahi, 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 there is no iman for the one who does not pray. This, as he breathed his last. This was his final words. The Prophet ﷺ became ill, came to the masjid. The people were worried about him. But on this particular day, he seemed to have gotten to get better. And he goes back to his home, his house. He's fine, it seems, for 3 days, and then he becomes ill again. It gets worse. Prophet Sallallahu was dying. He lost consciousness. And he would come back consciousness. It's happened 3 times. The first time that he regains consciousness, he, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, says, As-salah, as-salah. Take care of your salah and those who your right hand possess. And he lost consciousness. He came back again in consciousness, and again, as-salah, as-salah. Protect the salah and those with your right hand possess. And here it doesn't mean concubines. It means those under your care and protection. And the third time, again, as-salah, as-salah. Take care of the salah. And he died. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. You see, we don't value the salah enough. Not as those about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, Radiyallahu anhu wa radu anhu. We have to value the salah individually and collectively. Because as the Prophet ﷺ said, from Yom Qiyamah, before anything else, we, the men of us, the women of us, will be asked about the salah. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملت من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا قوم الكافرين أقيموا الصلاة for the help.